Hello everyone, Shirley here. Blizzard recently made some changes to racials on the BFA Alpha, as well as finally added or revealed the final Moghar Orc racial. So we've got all four of them now for the new brown orcs. But first things first, the racials that were changed, there is one for the Alliance and one for the Horde. Now starting with the Alliance one, because I think it's got less of an impact, Every Man for Himself, which is the human racial, has been nerfed. It now has a 3-minute cooldown, up from 2, and now shares a 90-second cooldown internal CD thing with other similar effects. So what this means is, it used to be 30 seconds before. What this means is that you can no longer trinket and then use the racial or vice versa within 90 seconds of one another, which used to be 30 seconds. So before you could pop Every Man for Himself when you got stunned, and then 30 seconds later you could trinket in an arena, for example, or in a battleground. And now that's going to be 90 seconds. So this is pretty substantial nerf, actually. There is a lot less leeway, you can't use it quite so frivolously as you could before. But not that big of a change, all things considered. They still have an extra stun break. It's still useful for PvE in certain dungeons, for example. Anyway, moving on to the Horde one. Arcane Torrent is no more. Well, kind of. Blizzard has gutted the spell. It has been completely redesigned. It still has its 1.5-minute cooldown, but it no longer silences enemies around you. It instead is like a purge. It's like an AoE purge. It dispels one random beneficial effect from every target around you within 8 yards. So no longer can you interrupt things for it. Instead, it's just going to remove a random buff. In PvP, this is huge. I mean, Arcane Torrent was one of the best racials for PvP because of the blanket silence. You didn't have to interrupt a cast with it. You could just blanket silence your target for 2 seconds. So you can't do that anymore. The dispel that it's going to have now is limited usefully. It's you can remove pre-shields and say HOTS off like a druid or something, but it's random, so it's not reliable, and it could take the wrong buff off of them, especially because we're getting class buffs back. It's okay. I mean, it's something, I guess, but compared to Arcane Torrent's former glory, it's not even close. And in PvE, this has been changed primarily, I would imagine, because of Mythic Plus. Because there were certain encounters and dungeons where you had a bunch of dangerous trash that would all cast things, and you could basically negate it all if you had a couple of Blood Elves in your group. You could gather everything up and just Arcane Torrent without caring, and just blanket silence the whole mob, and, nuke it down without too much. It was just too much blanket CC between AoE stuns and the AoE silence that was available to so many classes. So, I'm sad to see it go, but I understand why they had to do it. It was just too good for Mythic Plus, and since they're really, planning on doing this going forward with all the dungeons, it was expected, I suppose. Anyway, moving on to the new Orc racials that are finally done, and they're available now on the Alpha. If you didn't know, there are 4 of them, and I'll read through them real quick here for you. The first one is Open Skies, which increases your mounted speed by 10%. This is unknown if this will stack with other movement speed bonuses at max level. For example, the Pathfinder achievement increases your mounted speed. Will it stack? We don't know yet. Probably not, if I had to guess, because the Death Knight passive doesn't stack once you get it, and I don't think Crusade stacks from Paladins either. The next one is Sympathetic Vigor, which increases your pet health by 10%. We'll get on to comparing that in a second. The next one is Savage Blood, which reduces the duration of poisons, diseases, and curses by 10%. So that's going to shave off maybe a second from all those debuffs, depending on what it is. And the new one that was finally finished is called Ancestral Call. Now this is their 2-minute cooldown, similar to Blood Fury on Classic Orcs, except instead of increasing your attack power, it's going to increase one of your secondary stats randomly chosen for 12 seconds. So it'll increase your crit, haste, mastery, or verse by 102 at 110. This is going to scale, of course, up to 120. I'm not sure what the value is at max. For 12 seconds. So, what do I think about these? Frankly, I'm a little disappointed, because comparing them side by side to the current classic orc racials, I don't think they're just not as good. Granted, we're splitting hairs here, because the racials aren't that big of a deal compared to either orc. In the end, you should probably just play what looks the coolest to you. But as somebody who likes to really min-max their character in both PvEs and PvPs, you know, I can't help but be concerned about it, I guess, or at least try to think about it. Which sucks, because I was looking forward to changing Shirley into a brown orc, but I haven't made up my mind now. We'll have to wait and see, because comparing these side by side, the mounted speed I don't care about. This is going to make very little difference in the long run. Sympathetic Vigor, which increases your pet health, obviously doesn't affect me as a warrior, but for other classes that it does affect, it seems kind of like a wasted talent, or, you know, racial, because the standard orc has command, which increases pet damage by 1%. These aren't very big either way you look at it, you know, 1% versus a little bit more health. It's just, if you stack them up, like in raids, most pets don't take damage really, or they take heavily reduced AoE damage. They hardly ever die, so the pet health isn't that big of a deal. And in PvP, it hasn't really been the meta for a long time now to just simply kill pets in Arena. It's just not really worth it, so the pet health there doesn't really make a big difference. And compared to command, which is just a flat damage bonus all the time, it's easy to see, you know, what raiders would choose and PvPers here. You know, you're always going to want that damage bonus, even if it is very slight. I suppose this might help people that like to solo things as hunters or warlocks. You know, if you need a really tanky pet for something, it could help with that. So it's not totally useless, but it's just very limited. The other thing is Savage Blood, which reduces the duration of debuffs, poisons, diseases, and curses, those 3 debuffs specifically, by 10%. This also just seems like kind of a dead passive to me, because in PvP, those classes that are using those things are constantly reapplying them anyway, so the duration cutoff doesn't really matter, because it's always going to be on you. And sure, you could LOS something or get away, and then, you know, you're going to take maybe 1 tick less of these debuffs, but it's not going to happen that often. You know, it's hardly any damage mitigated. It's just not that big of a deal. And in raids, it's going to be the same thing. You know, maybe 1 tick off of these debuffs, and you're going to save a little bit of your healer's mana, but it's not going to be a huge amount. Compared to Hardiness on Classic Orcs, which reduces the durations of stuns by 20%, not 10. Hardiness is just better to me in every way. Because in a PvE situation, in a Mythic Plus, if you get stunned by a boss and then he's going to cast a AoE or something, and you got to go hide behind a pillar, for example, you know, you have this tight window after the stun to move. You know, Hardiness is just going to shave off a second, basically. So you've got a little bit of buffer to move and get in a position to do what you need to do. And in PvP, it's the same thing. If this is, you're fighting a rogue and he's going to stun lock you for the next 8 seconds, this is going to shave off a little bit of that and give you more time to counterattack, pop a defensive, run away, whatever it is you may do. So I think Hardiness is just better. And then last but not least is the on-use racial that they both have. Blood Fury versus Ancestral Call. Now, Blood Fury has a 2-minute CD, they both do, but Blood Fury lasts 15 seconds, and the new one's going to only last 12 seconds. So, you know, that sucks. I'm not sure why they didn't just mirror the duration on both. But Blood Fury, it increases your attack power for that duration. Hasn't scaled very well, it never has. It's always a little bit better at the start when you have that flat AP. Just, it's not that great late game. But it's okay, it's something to increase your burst every 2 minutes. Compared to Ancestral Call, on the other hand, it's random in nature, so this could be good and it could be useless. So, say for example you're a Fury Warrior and you pop all your cooldowns. Hopefully, the new racial won't be on the GCD like everything else, so you pop Recklessness and say the buff gives you crit during this window. So now this buff is useless during your burst window because you have 100% crit rating already. Now granted, it does last longer than Recklessness, so I guess you're getting a little bit of a benefit after that window. But it's only half the duration then at that point, so you're only getting that benefit from that crit for a very short time, compared to if it randomly rolls Mastery, for example, and you're enraged, so that's just a flat damage increase, and that's going to scale, you know, better in the long run with that flat Mastery. So it could be good, and it could be bad. What these two are going to stack up like at 120, number for number, like what kind of percents you're getting, I'm not sure yet. We'll have to wait and see. But they're fairly comparable, I guess. Granted, you roll the right thing, you know, with the new random one. It could be good, could be bad. I don't really care either way. They're both kind of flat damage increasing, you know, on use. They're not very interesting. You just put them in a macro and forget about it. It's mostly the passives that I was a little disappointed by, because they're just not as good as Classic Orc, and I was really hoping that they would just bake in a flat 1% bonus like they've done for so many other races, like a flat 1% versatility on the new High Mountain Torrent, or 1% crit like Blood Elves have. I was hoping for just something like that, you know, just something dedicated, but we haven't got it, so there it is, I suppose. I still haven't made up my mind if I'm going to end up changing to a Brown Orc. We'll have to... well, you guys will have to wait and see, I suppose. We'll see. Anyway, sorry about that. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Are you going to change? Are you going to make a new one? Are they just so cool that you have to have the new tattoos? I'm thinking about it. I mean, they are pretty damn cool. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.